My name is Jessica Miller, and I'm about to tell you how my family's greed turned into my greatest triumph. Picture this. Your parents demand you pay $50,000 for your spoiled sister's dream wedding while you're struggling to make ends meet. Now imagine their faces when they discover you actually own the $2 million venue where it's all happening. The moment my father realized he'd been ordering around a millionaire while treating me like the family failure, absolutely priceless. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing construction reports in my cramped studio apartment. Mom's voice was already sharp with annoyance before I even said hello. Jessica, we need to talk. About Emma's wedding. My sister Emma, 24 years old, never worked a day in her life, and somehow convinced our parents she deserved a $200,000 fairy tale wedding. I'd been hearing about nothing else for 6 months. What about it, Mom? The costs are higher than expected. We need you to contribute more. I'd already been guilted into promising $15,000 I didn't have. Money I'd been saving to finally move out of this shoebox apartment and maybe, just maybe, start living like the successful architect I'd worked so hard to become. How much more? $50,000. I almost dropped the phone. $50,000? Mom, I don't have that kind of money. You have a good job, Jessica. You're single, no responsibilities. Emma's wedding is a family investment. The Hendersons will be there, the Clarks, everyone who matters in this town. This is about our family's reputation. Our family's reputation. As if my years of straight A's, my MIT degree, my professional success meant nothing compared to Emma's ability to look pretty in white satin. I can't afford that, Mom. I'm barely making rent as it is. The silence stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then came the guilt trip I'd been dreading. Your sister has dreamed of this day since she was little. She's chosen Rosewood Estate, that beautiful venue overlooking the lake. It's perfect for her, but the venue costs alone are $80,000. We've already put down our life savings. Your father might have to take out another mortgage. Rosewood Estate. My chest tightened at the name. They had no idea, none of them, what that place meant to me. We're family, Jessica. Family supports. Family. Emma supported you through college. That was rich. Emma's version of support had been borrowing my car, my clothes, and my homework while I worked 3 jobs to pay tuition. I need time to think about it. Emma's engagement party is this Saturday. We'll discuss it then. Don't disappoint us, Jessica. We're counting on you. She hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. $50,000 for a wedding. For a sister who'd spent our entire childhood making my life miserable while our parents applauded her every breath. I walked to my window and looked out at the city skyline, at the buildings I'd helped design, at the success I'd built with my own hands. Success my family either ignored or saw as an ATM for their latest demands. They wanted me to pay for Rosewood Estate. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Almost. Growing up as Emma Miller's older sister was like being a shadow in your own life. While I spent high school nights studying calculus and physics, Emma spent them at parties, coming home with stories that made our parents beam with pride. Emma's so social, Mom would gush. She knows everyone. That's a real skill, Jessica. Maybe you should try being more like her. More like her. More like someone who'd failed algebra twice, who'd never held a job, who treated other people like accessories to be discarded when something shinier came along. When Emma decided she wanted to try out for cheerleading, suddenly my spot on the academic decathlon team was too nerdy and not good for the family image. When Emma wanted riding lessons, my college fund took a hit. When Emma crashed Dad's car junior year, they bought her a new one and lectured me about being more responsible with money. I learned early that in the Miller family hierarchy, Emma's wants would always trump my needs. College was my escape plan. MIT accepted me with a partial scholarship, but I still needed loans and 3 jobs to make it work. Every semester, I'd call home hoping for help, for encouragement, for something that felt like support. Instead, I got updates about Emma's social life, her boyfriend drama, her shopping sprees funded by the money that could have helped me graduate debt-free. Education is important, Dad would say, but Emma's learning life skills. She's developing her personality. Her personality, as if kindness, work ethic, and intelligence were somehow less valuable than the ability to manipulate people into doing what you wanted. When I graduated summa cum laude, they didn't come to the ceremony. Emma had a charity gala that same weekend. A charity gala where she posed for photos without actually donating anything, but the pictures looked good on social media. I'd built my career from nothing, working at a small firm in Boston before landing a position with Crawford and Associates, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in the Northeast. I'd designed community centers, office buildings, and luxury developments. My work had been featured in Architectural Digest twice, but at family gatherings, Emma's latest Instagram post got more attention than my professional achievements. Jessica's always been the serious one, they'd tell guests, as if seriousness was a character flaw. Emma's the one with the real sparkle. Sparkle. That's what they called her ability to charm people into giving her whatever she wanted. What they didn't know, what I'd never told them, was how I'd been using that sparkle against them for the past 3 years. While they dismissed me as the boring, struggling architect, I'd been quietly building something they couldn't even comprehend. The engagement party was held at our parents' country club, the same place where I'd spent my teenage years feeling like an outsider. Emma floated through the crowd in a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, accepting congratulations and gifts like she was royalty granting audiences. Her fiancé, Brad, was exactly what you'd expect. Handsome in a generic way, wealthy family, the kind of guy who'd never worked for anything but expected everything to be handed to him. Perfect for Emma. I arrived fashionably late, wearing my best professional outfit. Not designer, but well-tailored and elegant, the kind of thing a successful architect would wear to client meetings. Jessica! Emma rushed over, diamonds glittering at her throat. I'm so glad you're here. We need to talk about the wedding contributions. Always straight to business, my sister. No pleasantries, no how are you, just straight to what she wanted from me. Congratulations on the engagement, I said, forcing a smile. Rosewood Estate should be beautiful for the wedding. Her eyes lit up. Oh my God, yes. It's absolutely perfect. The gardens, the ballroom, the view of the lake. It's like something out of a fairy tale. Have you seen the venue in person yet? Not yet, but the photos are gorgeous. Dad's handling all the vendor meetings. You know how I am with details. I knew exactly how she was with details. She wanted the results, without any of the work. Dad appeared at Emma's elbow, looking harried and slightly desperate. The kind of look that came with realizing you'd promised your daughter a wedding you couldn't actually afford. Jessica, there you are. We need to discuss the financial arrangements. He steered me toward a quiet corner, away from the party guests and Emma's adoring crowd. Mom joined us, her smile tight with stress. We've run the numbers, Dad started, and with the venue, catering, flowers, photography, everything Emma wants, we're looking at about $200,000 total. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was calculating. They were being overcharged on almost everything. The catering alone was marked up by 300%. Your mother and I can cover $150,000 if we refinance the house and dip into retirement savings. The guilt trip was starting. I could feel it building like storm clouds. That leaves $50,000 we need you to contribute. I know it's a lot, but Emma's our baby. This is her dream wedding. What about Brad's family? I asked. Shouldn't they be contributing? Mom and Dad exchanged glances. The Hendersons are already paying for the honeymoon and the rehearsal dinner. They've been very generous. Generous. The Henderson family was worth about $50 million. Their idea of a generous rehearsal dinner probably cost more than my annual salary. I understand it's a stretch for you, Dad continued, but family is family. We've always supported each other. Always supported each other. I thought about my student loans, still not fully paid off. I thought about the years of hand-me-down clothes while Emma got shopping sprees. I thought about working 3 jobs through college while Emma got spending money for sorority events. I'll need to see the contracts, I said finally. If I'm investing this much money, I want to make sure everything's legitimate. Dad looked offended. Of course everything's legitimate. What kind of question is that? A practical one. $50,000 is a significant investment. I'd want documentation for any financial commitment this size. Fine, Mom said tersely. I'll have copies sent to you. But Jessica, we need your answer soon. The venue requires full payment 30 days before the wedding. The venue. If they only knew. I looked across the room at Emma, posing for photos with Brad, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine ad for privilege and entitlement. I'll give you my answer after I review the contracts, I said. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Time to review some contracts, all right? But not the ones they were planning to send me. I pulled up the file I'd been looking at for 3 years now. The deed to Rosewood Estate, the property management agreements, the LLC paperwork that made me the sole owner of one of the most exclusive wedding venues in the state. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Can't wait for you to see Rosewood. It's going to be perfect. I smiled, raising my wineglass to my laptop screen. Perfect, I agreed out loud. Absolutely perfect. The story of how I came to own Rosewood Estate started with the worst day of my professional life, 3 years earlier. I'd been working on the Morrison Community Center project for 8 months. It was going to be my masterpiece, a beautiful building that would serve low-income families in East Boston. The design was innovative, sustainable, and exactly the kind of work I'd dreamed of doing since architecture school. Then Crawford and Associates lost the contract. Budget cuts, my boss Richard explained, not meeting my eyes. The city decided to go with a cheaper firm. Cheaper. Which meant uglier, less functional, probably half the quality of what I'd designed. I'd poured my heart into that project, working 60-hour weeks, perfecting every detail. What about the Henderson project? I asked. The Hendersons had specifically requested me for their luxury development in the suburbs. Richard's uncomfortable silence told me everything I needed to know. They decided to go with Marcus instead. Marcus, who'd been with the firm for half as long as me, who spent more time networking than actually designing, who'd never created anything remotely innovative in his life. Why? They felt he was a better cultural fit. Cultural fit? Code for, he went to the right schools, knows the right people, and you're just the scholarship girl who works too hard. I'd walked out of that office knowing my career at Crawford and Associates was over. Not officially, not yet, but I could read the writing on the wall. They'd keep me around for the grunt work, the projects no one else wanted, but the real opportunities would go to people like Marcus. That afternoon, I'd driven aimlessly through the Massachusetts countryside, trying to process the betrayal when I saw the for sale sign at Rosewood Estate. The property was gorgeous, a sprawling 1920s mansion on 50 acres overlooking Lake Champlain. But it was also a disaster. The roof leaked, The electrical system was from the Eisenhower administration, and the previous owners had let it deteriorate for decades. The asking price was $1.8 million, which might as well have been $18 million for all the money I had. But I walked through it anyway, just to torture myself with something beautiful I couldn't afford. Beautiful bones, the realtor had said, but it needs someone with vision. Vision. I had that in spades. As I walked through the rotting ballroom and overgrown gardens, I could see exactly what it could become. Not just a restored mansion, but the most sought-after wedding venue in New England. That night, I'd done something crazy. I'd called my grandmother. Grandma Rose was my father's mother, a woman who'd built a small fortune through careful investments and stubborn determination. She was also the only member of my family who'd ever really understood me. "Jessica, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I'd told her everything: the lost contracts, the discrimination, the feeling that no matter how hard I worked, I'd always be seen as less than people like Marcus. "How much money do you have saved?" she'd asked. "About $200,000. 5 years of living like a monk, saving every penny, preparing for some undefined future opportunity." "And how much would you need to buy this property?" "Grandma, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering." "How much?" The next week, Grandma Rose had wired $1.6 million to my account with a simple note: "For my granddaughter who sees possibilities where others see problems." Buying Rosewood Estate was the biggest risk I'd ever taken. But as I stood in that crumbling ballroom, signing the papers, I knew I was finally betting on myself instead of waiting for someone else to give me permission to succeed. The renovation took 2 years and another $400,000. I did most of the architectural work myself, hiring craftsmen for the specialized labor. Slowly, methodically, I brought the estate back to life. The ballroom got a complete restoration, with crystal chandeliers and hardwood floors that gleamed like mirrors. The gardens were redesigned with terraced levels leading down to the lake, perfect for outdoor ceremonies. The bridal suites were appointed with antiques and modern amenities. By the time I was finished, Rosewood Estate was the most beautiful wedding venue within 200 miles. I'd kept the ownership quiet, operating through an LLC, managing bookings through a property management company. As far as anyone knew, I was still just Jessica Miller, struggling architect, living in a studio apartment and driving a 10-year-old Honda. Meanwhile, Rosewood Estate was booked solid, commanding premium prices from couples who wanted the perfect fairy tale wedding. Like Emma, the irony was delicious. My spoiled sister had chosen my venue for her dream wedding, never knowing that every dollar she'd spend would go directly into my bank account. But the real satisfaction wasn't financial. It was knowing that for once, finally, I held all the cards. The contracts arrived by email the next Tuesday, just as Mom had promised. I printed them out and spread them across my kitchen table, reviewing every line with the attention to detail that had made me a successful architect. The numbers were worse than I'd thought. They weren't just being overcharged. They were being systematically ripped off by vendors who saw the Miller family coming from a mile away. The catering contract was the most egregious: $150 per person for what amounted to rubber chicken and wilted salad. The photographer was charging $8,000 for a package that should cost half that. Even the flowers were marked up by 400%. But the venue contract was the masterpiece. Rosewood Estate was charging them $80,000 for the day, plus additional fees for setup, cleanup, and administrative costs that brought the total to nearly $95,000. I knew those numbers intimately because I'd set them myself. The standard rate for Rosewood Estate was actually $60,000, but we offered different pricing tiers based on various factors: location of ceremony, guest count, specific requirements. Emma's wedding had been classified as Tier 3 Premium, which included several luxury add-ons she didn't even know she was paying for. The private bridal suite for the entire weekend. Exclusive use of the gardens for photography. Premium linens and tableware. She was getting the royal treatment and paying royal prices. My phone rang as I was reviewing the florist contract. Emma's name appeared on the screen, along with a photo of her posing with a martini at some charity event. Jess, did you get the contracts? Aren't you so excited? They're very comprehensive, I said carefully. I know, right? Dad handled all the negotiations. He's so good at business stuff. Dad's business acumen had resulted in them paying about $50,000 more than necessary, but I kept that observation to myself. Have you been to see the venue yet? Actually, Brad and I are going this weekend. The property manager is giving us the full tour. I literally cannot wait. The photos online are gorgeous, but I want to see it in person. My venue. She was touring my venue, gushing about my gardens, my ballroom, my vision brought to life. I'm sure it will be beautiful. So, about the money. Emma's voice shifted to that wheedling tone I remembered from childhood. Have you decided? Mom and Dad are really stressed about the budget. They were stressed about a budget that included paying me $95,000 to use my own property. The cosmic justice of it was almost overwhelming. I'm still reviewing everything. Jess, come on. It's not like you're investing in some random thing. This is my wedding. Your sister's wedding. This is about family. Family. The word had been weaponized against me so many times I'd lost count. I understand it's important to you. Important? It's the most important day of my life. I've been planning this since I was 5 years old. Every detail has to be perfect. Every detail that someone else was paying for, organizing and executing while she posed for Instagram photos. Emma, can I ask you something? Sure. Why Rosewood Estate specifically? There are other venues, probably less expensive ones. Are you kidding? Rosewood is like the ultimate venue. It's where the Ashworth wedding was, and the Morrison anniversary party. Everyone who matters has events there. It's exclusive, classy, everything I want my wedding to be. Exclusive and classy. My venue was exclusive and classy. Plus, Emma continued, the property manager said they rarely have openings. We're so lucky they had a cancellation for our date. There had been no cancellation. When the booking request came in for Miller Henderson wedding, I'd personally approved it. I'd been curious to see what would happen when my family tried to book my venue. I'd never imagined they'd have the audacity to demand I pay for it. I should let you go, I said. Enjoy the tour this weekend. I will. And Jess? Thank you. For everything. I know this is a lot of money, but having my family there, having everyone I love celebrating with me, it means everything. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the contract spread across my table. All those numbers, all that stress, all those demands for money I supposedly didn't have. Meanwhile, my actual bank account showed a balance that would make my parents faint. Rosewood Estate had been profitable from month one. Premium weddings every weekend during wedding season, corporate retreats and private parties filling the calendar year-round. The property was generating about $2 million annually in revenue, with profit margins that would make any business owner weep with joy. I'd also diversified into other investments, a small portfolio of rental properties, some carefully chosen stocks, a few private equity investments recommended by my financial advisor. Conservative estimates put my net worth somewhere around $3.2 million. But as far as my family knew, I was still struggling, Jessica, living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by in my studio apartment. The apartment was a choice, not a necessity. I liked the simplicity, the lack of maintenance, the downtown location close to my office. Why buy a house I didn't need when I already owned a 50-acre estate? The old Honda was also a choice. Reliable, efficient, invisible. The perfect car for someone who preferred to fly under the radar. My entire lifestyle was carefully constructed to maintain the illusion of financial struggle. It kept my family from asking for money I didn't want to give, and it kept my success private until I decided how to reveal it. Emma's wedding was going to be that revelation. I just hadn't decided exactly how dramatic to make it. Saturday morning, I drove out to Rosewood Estate to observe Emma's tour from a distance. The property manager, Catherine Walsh, was a consummate professional who'd been running high-end events for 20 years. She had no idea who I really was. To her, I was just another client who preferred to stay anonymous. I parked in the visitor lot and watched as a white BMW pulled up to the main entrance. Emma stepped out wearing designer jeans and heels completely inappropriate for touring outdoor spaces. Brad emerged from the driver's side in country club casual, looking like he'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren catalog. They were exactly what I'd expected. Catherine met them at the front entrance, impeccably dressed and carrying a leather portfolio. Even from a distance, I could see Emma's excited gestures as they talked. I followed at a discreet distance as Catherine led them through the estate. The grand foyer with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. The restored ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. The bridal suite with its antique furnishings and modern amenities. Emma was practically bouncing with excitement, pulling out her phone to take photos at every turn. Brad looked appropriately impressed, nodding at Catherine's explanations of capacity, catering logistics, and photography opportunities. They spent an hour touring the interior before moving to the gardens. I watched from behind the rose arbor as Emma posed for selfies on the main terrace, the lake sparkling behind her. "It's perfect," her voice carried clearly across the manicured lawn. "Absolutely perfect. We have to have it here." Catherine smiled professionally. "I'm delighted you're pleased with the property. Shall we discuss the contract details?" They moved to the garden pavilion, where Catherine had set up a presentation about pricing, packages, and logistics. I crept close enough to hear the conversation while staying hidden behind a hedge that I'd personally selected and planted. "The premium package includes exclusive use of the entire estate for the weekend," Catherine was explaining. "Friday for rehearsal and welcome dinner, Saturday for the wedding ceremony and reception, and Sunday morning for farewell brunch." "And the cost?" Brad asked. "For your guest count and date, the total investment would be $95,000. Emma didn't even flinch at the number. Why would she? She wasn't paying for it. "What does that include exactly?" Brad's business school training was showing. Catherine walked them through the package. Exclusive venue access, tables and chairs for 200 guests, premium linens, basic lighting, access to preferred vendor list, day of coordination, and use of both bridal suites. The catering, florals, photography, and entertainment would be separate contracts with your chosen vendors, Catherine added. "We're working with Prestige Catering," Emma said proudly. I almost snorted. Prestige Catering was notorious for overcharging and under-delivering. They were on Rosewood's not recommended list, but Catherine was too professional to say anything negative about a client's choice. "I'm sure they'll do a lovely job," Catherine said diplomatically. "Shall I prepare the contract?" "Yes," Emma practically shouted. "This is it, Brad. This is where we're getting married." Brad looked less certain. "It's a lot of money, Em. It's our wedding. It has to be perfect." "Your family is contributing significantly," Brad pointed out. "Maybe we should consider some less expensive options." Emma's face darkened. This was the expression I remembered from childhood. The one that appeared whenever someone suggested she couldn't have exactly what she wanted. "Brad, we've talked about this. I'm not having some budget wedding at a country club or hotel. This is Rosewood Estate. This is where the Ashworths got married, where celebrities have events. This is the wedding I've dreamed of since I was little." I understand, but no buts. My parents and Jessica are handling the venue cost. Your parents are covering the honeymoon and rehearsal dinner. We're getting the wedding of a lifetime, and everyone we know will be insanely jealous. Everyone we know will be insanely jealous. That was Emma's primary motivation for most of her life choices. Brad capitulated, as I'd known he would. Emma had that effect on people. She made her wants seem so important, so urgent, that opposing them felt cruel. "All right," he said. "Let's do it." Catherine smiled and shook their hands. "Wonderful. I'll have the contracts prepared and sent to your parents by Monday." As they walked back toward their car, Emma was already planning. "We'll have the ceremony on the main terrace, with the lake in the background. The cocktail hour can be in the Rose Garden, then reception in the ballroom with dancing until midnight." "Sounds perfect, babe." "It will be perfect. Everything will be absolutely perfect." I waited until their car disappeared down the driveway before walking over to Catherine. "Miss Walsh?" She turned, recognizing me immediately. "Miss Anderson! I didn't expect to see you here today." Miss Anderson. That was the name on my LLC, a small tribute to Grandma Rose, whose maiden name was Anderson. "I wanted to observe the tour personally. This booking is special." They seem like a lovely couple, very enthusiastic about the property. "Yes, they are." "Did everything go smoothly with the contract discussion?" "Perfectly. They're ready to move forward with the premium package for September 15th. September 15th, Emma's dream wedding date, exactly 6 months away. "Excellent. Please send me copies of all communications with this client. I want to stay closely involved with this particular event." Catherine looked slightly puzzled but nodded. "Of course. Is there anything specific you'd like me to monitor?" "Just the usual. Payment schedules, vendor coordination, any special requests. I have a feeling this wedding is going to require some personal attention." The contracts went out Monday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, Dad was calling with updates. "Everything looks good, Jessica. The venue is confirmed. Deposit paid. Emma's over the moon." Of course she was. She was getting exactly what she wanted, as always. "When do you need my contribution?" "The final payment is due 30 days before the wedding, so mid-August. That gives you about 6 months to get the money together." 6 months to get together money I already had, to pay myself for the use of my own property, to fund my sister's fantasy while my parents bankrupted themselves. The sheer absurdity of it was almost beautiful. "I'll work on it," I promised. "Jessica, I want you to know how much this means to us. To Emma. Family supporting family, that's what matters most. Family supporting family." If only he knew how accurate that statement was about to become. The next 6 months passed in a blur of wedding planning drama that I observed from my unique position as both unwilling financier and secret venue owner. Emma's demands escalated weekly. The floral budget doubled when she decided she needed white orchids flown in from Thailand. The photography package expanded to include engagement photos, bridal portraits, and a videography team. The catering menu grew to include a raw bar, premium liquor package, and late-night snack service. Every addition came with a phone call. "Jessica, we need another $5,000 for upgraded linens." "Jessica, the cake designer requires a larger deposit." "Jessica, Emma wants a special lighting package for the reception." Each request was presented as non-negotiable, essential to Emma's happiness, crucial for the family's reputation. Each time I agreed after appropriate hesitation and concern about my finances. Meanwhile, my real financial situation continued to improve. Rosewood Estate was having its best year ever, booked solid through the following season. My investment portfolio had grown by 15%. I'd even quietly purchased another property, a small vineyard in Napa that I planned to develop as a second venue location. But to my family, I remained Jessica, the struggling architect. Jessica, who worked long hours for modest pay. Jessica, who was sacrificing her own financial security for Emma's perfect day. The psychological dynamics were fascinating to observe. The more money they demanded, the more superior they felt. Dad started giving me financial advice about budgeting and long-term planning. Mom suggested I find a more lucrative career path. Emma began treating me like a generous but slightly pathetic older sister, patting my hand and promising to make it up to me somehow. Their condescension grew in direct proportion to their dependence on my supposed sacrifice. 2 months before the wedding, Emma invited me to lunch at the country club to discuss final details. I arrived to find her holding court at a table with 3 of her bridesmaids, all of them immaculately dressed and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Jess! Emma jumped up to hug me, making a show of our sisterly bond for her audience. Girls, this is my sister Jessica, the one who's making this whole wedding possible. The bridesmaids smiled politely, the kind of smiles that said they'd heard about the poor sister who was funding Emma's fairy tale out of misguided family loyalty. "You're so generous," one of them said. "Not everyone would make such a sacrifice for family." Sacrifice. That word had become Emma's favorite way to describe my contribution, as if I were throwing myself on a grenade rather than investing in my own property. "Family is important," I said simply. Emma beamed. "See? I told you guys Jessica was amazing. She totally gets what this wedding means to me." We sat down to lunch, and Emma immediately launched into her latest crisis. "So, I had the final walkthrough at Rosewood yesterday, and I realized we absolutely have to have the premium floral package. The basic package just looks so basic. But it's another $8,000. $8,000 for flowers?" I tried to look appropriately shocked. "I know it sounds like a lot, but Jess, you should see what they can do. Hanging installations in the ballroom, a flower wall for photos, petals scattered down the aisle. It's going to be like something out of a magazine." It was going to be like something out of a magazine because Emma had literally torn pages out of wedding magazines and demanded that the florist recreate every detail. "The thing is," Emma continued, "Brad's parents are already stressed about the rehearsal dinner costs, and Mom and Dad have maxed out their contribution. So I was hoping, you need me to cover the additional flowers. You're the best sister in the world." Emma reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I promise I'll pay you back somehow. Maybe after we're married and Brad's trust fund kicks in fully." Brad's trust fund. Another piece of information my future brother-in-law had apparently shared with his fiancée. The Henderson family money was substantial, but most of it was tied up in trusts and investments that Brad wouldn't fully access until he turned 30. "Don't worry about paying me back," I said. "This is your wedding. It should be perfect." Emma's eyes actually teared up. "You're going to make me cry." "Seriously, Jess, I don't know how I got so lucky to have you as a sister." Lucky. That was one way to put it. One of the bridesmaids, a blonde named Madison, leaned forward conspiratorially. "Emma, you have to tell her about the dress situation." Emma's face lit up. "Oh my God, yes. So I found the most incredible vintage veil at this boutique in New York. It's from the 1920s. Absolutely stunning. But it's $3,000 and it doesn't match my current dress." I had a sinking feeling about where this was going. So I found a new dress that's perfect with the veil. It's by Vera Wang, completely gorgeous but obviously more expensive than what we budgeted for. How much more expensive? Well, the original dress was $8,000 and this one is $15,000. But Jess, it's the dress, the one I've been dreaming of. And with the vintage veil, I'll look like a 1920s movie star. $7,000 more for a dress she'd wear for one day, plus $3,000 for a vintage veil. plus $8,000 for upgraded flowers. The additional costs were spiraling into the stratosphere. Emma, that's a lot of money. I know, but this is my one wedding. My one chance to be a princess. And honestly, after everything with the venue costs and catering, what's a few thousand more? What's a few thousand more? Spoken like someone who'd never earned a few $1,000s in her life. The bridesmaids were watching our conversation like spectators at a tennis match, clearly fascinated by the financial dynamics playing out in front of them. Look, Emma said, lowering her voice to what she probably thought was a sincere tone. I know you're struggling financially. I know this is a huge sacrifice. But Jess, you're investing in our family's future. When Brad and I are established, when his career takes off, and the trust fund matures, we'll remember who was there for us when it mattered. We'll remember who was there for us. As if my contribution was some kind of loan against their future success, rather than a gift I was being emotionally blackmailed into providing. I just need a few more weeks to figure out the additional funds, I said. Emma clapped her hands together. You're amazing. This is going to be the most incredible wedding ever. Everyone's going to be so jealous. That was Emma's ultimate goal. Not a meaningful ceremony, not the start of a loving marriage, but making everyone jealous. Mission accomplished, as far as I was concerned. Everyone was definitely going to be jealous of this wedding. Just not in the way Emma expected. The final month before the wedding was a masterclass in last-minute panic and escalating demands. Emma called daily with new emergencies that required immediate financial solutions. The band needed upgraded sound equipment. The photographer wanted to bring an assistant. The caterer had miscalculated the service charges. Each crisis was presented as unforeseen, unavoidable, and somehow my responsibility to solve. By the week of the wedding, my supposed contribution had grown to nearly $75,000, money that my parents believed I'd scraped together through loans, savings account raids, and probably some creative financing they were afraid to ask about. Jessica, honey, are you sure you can afford all this? Mom had asked during one of our final planning calls. We don't want you to go into debt for Emma's wedding. Too little, too late for maternal concern. But I appreciated the irony of her worrying about my financial welfare while demanding I bankrupt myself for Emma's fairy tale. I'll manage, I'd assured her. Family is family. 3 days before the wedding, I got the call I'd been expecting. Jess, we have a huge problem. Emma's voice was pitched high with panic. The final payment for Rosewood is due tomorrow, and Dad's check bounced. Dad's check bounced. Which meant their finances were even worse than I'd suspected. What happened? I don't know. Something about the bank freezing the account pending some investigation. Dad's trying to sort it out, but Jess, if we don't pay tomorrow, they'll cancel the wedding. The desperation in her voice was real. For the first time in her privileged life, Emma was facing the possibility of not getting exactly what she wanted. How much is needed? $45,000 for the venue balance plus another $15,000 we owe various vendors. $60,000 total. I know it's a lot, but Jess, you have to help me. You're the only one who can save my wedding. $60,000 to save her wedding, at my own venue. I'll see what I can do, I said. Oh my God, thank you. You're literally saving my life. I'll figure out how to pay you back, I promise. Maybe we can set up a payment plan or something. A payment plan. To pay me back for my own money. Don't worry about it right now, I said. Let me make some calls and see what I can arrange. That evening, I called Catherine Walsh at Rosewood Estate. Ms. Walsh, it's Jessica Anderson. I understand there's an issue with the Miller wedding payment. Yes, unfortunately their check was returned for insufficient funds. According to our contract, we need payment by noon tomorrow, or we'll have to release the date. I'd like to handle this personally. Please accept payment from my corporate account and send all future communications about this wedding directly to me. Of course. Will you be attending the wedding yourself? I smiled at the phone. Oh yes. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The wedding day dawned perfect and cloudless, exactly the kind of September morning that made New England famous. I stood on the balcony of my real apartment, not the studio I let my family believe I lived in, and looked out at the rolling hills surrounding my actual home, a restored colonial farmhouse about 10 miles from Rosewood Estate. Today was the day. After 6 months of playing the role of struggling, sacrificing sister, it was time for the performance of a lifetime. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy dress and pearls, the kind of outfit that said, responsible older sister who knows her place. My hair was pulled back in a simple chignon, my makeup understated. I looked exactly like what my family expected. Jessica the practical, Jessica the reliable, Jessica who'd spent her life savings to make Emma's dreams come true. The irony was delicious. I arrived at Rosewood Estate 2 hours before the ceremony, using my owner's access to park in the private lot behind the main building. The place was already bustling with activity as vendors set up for the evening ahead. The flowers were spectacular, I had to admit. Emma's upgraded package had transformed the ballroom into a garden paradise, with hanging installations and cascading arrangements that would photograph beautifully. The catering team was setting up the raw bar and arranging hors d'oeuvres for cocktail hour. Even the band was doing sound checks, filling the air with snippets of classical music. My money had bought the best of everything. I walked through the setup with the satisfaction of an owner reviewing her investment. Every detail was perfect, every vendor performing to the exacting standards that made Rosewood Estate the premier venue in the region. Catherine Walsh found me in the garden pavilion, reviewing the ceremony setup. Ms. Anderson, I didn't expect to see you here so early. I wanted to ensure everything was perfect. This wedding is particularly important to me. The bride and her party arrived an hour ago. They're getting ready in the bridal suite. Would you like me to introduce you? Not yet. I'll make my appearance at the appropriate time. Catherine nodded, clearly curious about my unusual interest in this particular wedding, but too professional to pry. The guests began arriving at 4 p.m. for the 5:30 ceremony. I positioned myself in the main foyer where I could observe without being immediately noticed. My family always made grand entrances. Subtlety had never been their strong suit. The first wave included extended family and family friends, people I recognized from years of holiday gatherings and graduation parties. They moved through the space with appropriate awe, taking photos and commenting on the elegance of the venue. Then came the Hendersons, Brad's family, arriving in a convoy of luxury cars. His parents were exactly what I'd expected. Old money personified, moving through the crowd with the practiced grace of people accustomed to exclusive events. Finally, the Miller family contingent arrived. Dad looked stressed but proud, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent on the studio apartment they thought I lived in. Mom was resplendent in mother of the bride attire, clearly living her best life at her daughter's society wedding. They paused in the foyer, taking in the grandeur of the space they'd demanded I pay for. Incredible, I heard Dad tell someone. Emma has exquisite taste. Emma's taste. As if the venue selection had been some brilliant aesthetic choice, rather than Emma picking the most expensive, exclusive option available. I waited until most of the guests had moved to the garden for cocktails before approaching my parents. Mom, Dad. They turned, and for a moment I saw genuine warmth in their faces. Whatever our issues, they were happy to see me at Emma's wedding. Jessica, sweetheart, you look beautiful. Mom hugged me, and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume. Emma's going to be so happy you're here. I wouldn't miss it. The venue is incredible, Dad said, gesturing around the foyer. Emma really knows how to pick them. Though I have to say, the cost nearly gave me a heart attack. But worth every penny, Mom added quickly. This is the kind of wedding people remember forever. They had no idea how memorable this wedding was about to become. Have you seen Emma yet? Mom asked. Not yet. I thought I'd let her have her moment. She's radiant, absolutely glowing. The dress, the veil, everything's perfect. Perfect. That word again. Emma's favorite word and the standard by which she measured everything in her life. I should go find a seat, I said. Where am I sitting? Mom looked slightly embarrassed. Table 12, with some of Brad's cousins. I know it's not ideal, but with Emma's sorority sisters and Brad's business school friends, the seating chart was complicated. Table 12. Not at the family table, not even close to the front. I was seated in the back with the overflow relatives, despite being the person who'd made this entire event possible. That's fine, I said. I'm just happy to be here. I made my way to the garden where cocktail hour was in full swing. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, making the lake sparkle like diamonds. Guests mingled on the terraced lawn, champagne glasses catching the light. Everyone dressed in their finest for Emma's perfect day. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and positioned myself where I could observe the social dynamics. The Hendersons held court near the rose arbor, discussing what sounded like business ventures and vacation homes. Emma's friends clustered around the fountain, taking selfies and gossiping about who was dating whom. The extended family spread across the middle ground, making small talk and admiring the venue. No one paid much attention to me. I was just Jessica, the sister who'd done her duty and faded into the background where she belonged. Perfect. At 5:15, the wedding coordinator began moving guests toward the ceremony site on the main terrace. I found my assigned seat in the back row, next to Brad's cousin and his wife, who introduced themselves politely before returning to their conversation about private schools. The string quartet began the processional, and guests turned toward the aisle that had been created between rows of white chairs. The lake provided a stunning backdrop, exactly as Emma had envisioned. The groomsmen walked out first, Brad's fraternity brothers and business school friends, all looking appropriately handsome in their matching tuxedos. Then Brad himself appeared, taking his position at the altar with a nervousness that was either pre-wedding jitters or dawning realization of what he was committing himself to. The bridesmaids followed, a parade of blondes in matching blush pink gowns, each carrying a bouquet of white roses. They moved with practiced grace, having clearly rehearsed their entrance multiple times. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The music shifted to the bridal march, and every guest rose to their feet. Emma appeared at the back of the aisle, and even I had to admit she looked spectacular. The Vera Wang gown was everything she'd promised, a masterpiece of silk and beading that caught the light with every step. The vintage veil flowed behind her like something out of a fairy tale. She carried a cascade bouquet of white orchids, the ones that had been flown in from Thailand at enormous expense. She looked like a princess. She looked like a movie star. She looked like every bride's dream of perfection. Dad walked beside her, beaming with pride, clearly savoring his moment escorting his daughter down the aisle at her society wedding. As they passed my row, Emma's eyes found mine. She smiled brilliantly, a look of pure happiness and gratitude that said, "Thank you for making this possible." I smiled back, raising my champagne glass in a small salute. "You're welcome," I thought. "Enjoy every second of this, because it's all about to change." The ceremony was everything Emma had dreamed of. Traditional vows, meaningful readings, a string quartet providing elegant background music. The officiant spoke beautifully about love, commitment, and the joining of two families. Brad's voice cracked slightly when he said "I do," whether from emotion or nerves I couldn't tell. Emma's response was clear and confident, the voice of someone who'd been planning this moment for years. When they were pronounced husband and wife, The applause was thunderous. 200 guests celebrating the perfect wedding, the fairy tale romance, the happy ending to Emma's long courtship with her Prince Charming. The receiving line moved quickly, with Emma and Brad accepting congratulations and posing for photos. When my turn came, Emma grabbed me in an enthusiastic hug. "Jess, thank you so much for being here, for everything. This is literally the happiest day of my life." "You look beautiful," I said sincerely. "Absolutely radiant." "The venue is perfect, isn't it?" "Even better than I imagined. Thank you again for making this possible. I know it was a huge sacrifice." "No sacrifice is too great for family," I replied. She beamed at that, squeezing my hands before turning to the next well-wisher in line. Cocktail hour resumed in the garden while the ballroom was prepared for dinner. The photographers were working overtime, capturing Emma and Brad in every conceivable pose around the estate grounds. The videography team followed them discreetly, documenting every moment of their perfect day. I mingled appropriately, making small talk with distant relatives and family friends. Everyone was effusive in their praise for the venue, the flowers, the overall elegance of the event. "Emma really outdid herself," Aunt Patricia told me. "This must have cost a fortune." "It's her special day," I replied diplomatically. Still, in my day, we were more practical about these things. "Though I suppose when you have family willing to help." She gave me a meaningful look, clearly aware of my supposed financial contribution. "Family takes care of family," I said. At 7 p.m., the guests were invited into the ballroom for dinner. The transformation was breathtaking. The upgraded lighting package had turned the space into something magical, with pin spots highlighting the floral arrangements and soft washes of color painting the walls. The band was set up on the small stage, ready to provide entertainment through dinner and dancing. I found my assigned table and took my seat between Brad's cousin Mark and his wife Jennifer. They were pleasant enough company, though clearly more interested in discussing their recent trip to Tuscany than getting to know Emma's sister. The dinner service began with champagne toasts. Brad's father spoke first, welcoming Emma to the Henderson family and praising Brad's choice in a life partner. His speech was polished and diplomatic, the kind of remarks you'd expect from someone accustomed to public speaking. Then it was Dad's turn. He rose from the head table, champagne glass in hand, looking every inch the proud father of the bride. The room quieted as he began to speak. 24 years ago, my wife and I were blessed with a daughter who brought light and joy into our lives from day one. Emma has always been special, always been the kind of person who makes everyone around her happier just by being herself. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Emma wiped away a tear, clearly moved by her father's words. "Raising Emma has been one of the greatest privileges of my life," Dad continued. "Watching her grow into the beautiful, intelligent, caring woman she is today has filled my heart with pride every single day." He paused, his voice growing more emotional. "Planning this wedding has been a family effort. Everyone has contributed to making Emma's dreams come true. Her mother, who handled 1,000 details with grace and style, her new in-laws, who welcomed her with open arms, and especially her sister Jessica, who made sacrifices I can never fully repay to ensure this day was everything Emma wanted it to be." The guests turned to look at me, applauding politely. I smiled and raised my glass, playing my part perfectly. "Emma, my darling daughter, your wedding is a reflection of who you are, beautiful, elegant, and absolutely perfect. Brad, you're getting the most wonderful woman in the world. Take care of her, cherish her, and remember how lucky you are every single day." He raised his glass higher. "To Emma and Brad, and to a lifetime of happiness." The room erupted in applause and cheers as guests raised their glasses. Emma was crying openly now, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. It was beautiful. It was touching. It was everything a father of the bride's speech should be. It was also the perfect setup for what I was about to do. As the applause died down and guests returned to their conversations, I stood up from my table. Mark and Jennifer looked at me curiously as I smoothed my dress and picked up my champagne glass. "Excuse me," I said loud enough to be heard over the dinner conversation. "I'd like to say something too." The room gradually quieted as people realized Emma's sister was standing to speak. This wasn't on the program, wasn't part of the planned speeches, but family members often made impromptu toasts at weddings. Emma looked surprised but pleased, probably expecting more gratitude and sisterly love. "Thank you," I said as the room fell silent. "I don't usually speak at public events, but tonight feels like the perfect time to share something special." I walked toward the front of the room, champagne glass in hand, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged in spaces like this, because I did belong here. This was my space. "My father spoke beautifully about family contributions to this wedding," I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom, "about sacrifices and supporting each other. And he's absolutely right. This wedding has been a family effort." Emma was beaming, probably thinking I was about to give an emotional speech about sisterly love and shared sacrifice. Emma chose Rosewood Estate for her wedding because she wanted perfection. She wanted elegance, beauty, exclusivity. She wanted a venue that would make everyone envious, that would create memories to last a lifetime. I paused, looking around the room at the gorgeous floral arrangements, the crystal chandeliers, the elegant linens and place settings. She chose well. This venue truly is special. It's been my honor to contribute to making Emma's dreams come true here. More approving murmurs from the crowd. This was going exactly as they expected, exactly as they wanted. But there's something I want to share with all of you tonight, something that makes this wedding even more meaningful to me personally. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document, the deed to Rosewood Estate, with my name clearly visible as the owner. You see, when Emma chose Rosewood Estate, she didn't just choose a beautiful venue. She chose my venue. I own Rosewood Estate. The silence that followed was profound. You could have heard a pin drop in that ballroom. Emma's face went from confusion to shock to something approaching horror as the implications hit her. "I've owned this property for 3 years," I continued, my voice steady and calm. "I bought it, restored it, and built it into the premier wedding venue you're enjoying tonight. Every dollar you've spent here, every payment you've worried about, every check you've written, it's all come back to me." Dad looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Mom had gone pale as the elegant linens. At the head table, Emma was staring at me with her mouth open, clearly unable to process what she was hearing. So when my family asked me to contribute $75,000 to Emma's wedding expenses, including the venue costs, they were essentially asking me to pay myself to use my own property, which I did, happily, because I wanted Emma to have the perfect wedding. The crowd was beginning to murmur, the social dynamics shifting as people realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. But more than that, I wanted Emma to understand something important. About family, about contribution, about the difference between earning something and simply demanding it. I turned to look directly at Emma, who had tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of joy anymore. "Emma, you spent months telling me about sacrifices and family obligations. You asked me to invest in your future, to support your dreams, to put your happiness above my own financial security." My voice grew stronger, more confident. "What you didn't realize is that I've been investing in my own future for years. While you were planning parties and shopping for designer clothes, I was building a business. While you were assuming I was struggling financially, I was creating exactly the kind of success you claim to want for yourself. The ballroom was dead silent now, except for the soft sound of Emma crying. This venue, this perfect wedding, this fairy tale evening, it's all been possible because I worked for it. I earned it. I built it from nothing, with my own hands and my own vision. I looked around the room at the stunned faces, at my parents who looked like their world had just tilted off its axis, at the guests who were witnessing the most dramatic wedding speech in social history. So yes, Emma got her perfect wedding. Yes, she got everything she dreamed of, but she got it because her supposedly struggling, financially irresponsible sister was actually successful enough to give it to her. I raised my champagne glass one more time. To Emma and Brad, and to the importance of really knowing the people you love. Congratulations, and enjoy the rest of your evening at my venue. The aftermath was immediate and spectacular. Emma burst into full sobbing, the kind of ugly crying that no amount of professional makeup could withstand. Brad looked completely bewildered, clearly trying to process the revelation that his new sister-in-law was apparently a secret millionaire. Dad pushed back from the head table so hard his chair nearly toppled over. This is impossible. You can't own this. Can't. Place. You live in a studio apartment? I live in a studio apartment by choice, I replied calmly. It's convenient and low maintenance. My actual home is a restored colonial about 10 miles from here. Mom found her voice. The money we paid for the venue went directly into my business account. Thank you for your patronage. The guests were buzzing now. Phone cameras coming out as people realized they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a social media event in the making. Emma tried to stand, but her elaborate dress made movement difficult. You made me beg. You knew we were struggling, and you just watched. I watched you assume that I was struggling while you planned a wedding that cost more than most people's annual salaries, I corrected. I watched you demand money from parents who had to refinance their house to afford your dreams. I watched you treat my supposed sacrifice as something you deserved rather than something you should be grateful for. This is fraud, Dad shouted, his face purple with rage and embarrassment. You deceived us. I never lied about anything. You assumed I was poor because I live modestly. You assumed I was struggling because I work hard. You assumed I needed your guidance and pity because you've never bothered to actually know who I am or what I've accomplished. Brad finally found his voice. Emma, did you know about this? Emma whirled on him, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Of course I didn't know. Do you think I would have, if I had known she was... She couldn't even finish the sentence. The truth was too humiliating. She'd spent months treating me like a charity case, while planning her wedding at my venue with my money. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. The bar remains open, the band is ready to play, and dinner service will continue. Please, enjoy the rest of the celebration. But it was too late for normal celebration. The revelation had shifted the entire energy of the room. Guests were whispering intensely, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Some were already texting and posting to social media. The Henderson family looked mortified by the public scene, while the Miller relatives seemed torn between shock and fascination. Catherine Walsh appeared at my elbow, looking professionally concerned about the disruption to her event. Miss Anderson, is everything all right? Do you need anything? Everything's perfect, Catherine. Just a family discussion that got a bit heated. Please make sure the band continues playing and the service proceeds normally. She nodded and moved away to manage the logistics of keeping a wedding reception running, despite the nuclear bomb that had just exploded at the head table. Emma had managed to stand and was now approaching me with fury radiating from every pore. You ruined my wedding! You destroyed the most Important day of my life. I didn't ruin anything, Emma. Your wedding is still beautiful. The venue is still perfect. You're still married to Brad. The only thing that's changed is that you now know who actually made it all possible. You're sick. What kind of person does this to their own sister? The kind of person who spent 6 months listening to that sister complain about money while planning a wedding at her venue, I replied. The kind of person who watched her family assume she was a failure while she was actually more successful than any of them. Mom had joined Emma, both of them standing in front of me like I was some kind of criminal. Jessica, how could you deceive us like this? We're your family. You deceived yourselves, Mom. You saw what you wanted to see. Poor Jessica, struggling Jessica, Jessica who needed your guidance and pity. You never once asked about my actual life or my actual success because it didn't fit the narrative you preferred. Dad was approaching too, his businessman's mind clearly working to understand the financial implications. If you own this place, you must be worth more than enough to afford my contribution to Emma's wedding, I finished. More than enough to never worry about money again. More than enough to realize that family support should flow both ways. But why? Emma's voice cracked. Why did you let me think? Because I wanted to see what you would do. I wanted to see if my family would ask about my well-being, my success, my happiness. Instead, you saw an opportunity to take more money and demanded I sacrifice for your benefit without offering anything in return. The conversation was interrupted by Brad's father, who had approached with the kind of diplomatic caution that wealthy families used when navigating social disasters. Perhaps, he said quietly, this discussion would be better continued in private. There are many guests here, and I'm sure everyone would prefer to enjoy the evening. He was right, of course. The spectacle had gone on long enough. But I wasn't quite finished. You're absolutely right, Mr. Henderson. Emma, Brad, I hope you have a wonderful marriage and a fantastic honeymoon. The gift I've given you, this wedding, this venue, this perfect day, is my wedding present. Consider us even on all family obligations. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, your account with Rosewood Estate is settled in full. You owe nothing further, and you owe me nothing further either. Then I looked around the ballroom one more time, at the gorgeous space I'd created, at the perfect wedding I'd made possible, at the family who had never really known me at all. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. The dancing should be spectacular. I walked out of the ballroom with my head high, leaving behind the most memorable wedding reception in Miller family history. The next morning, I woke up in my real home, in my king-sized bed with its view of the rolling hills, and checked my phone. 17 missed calls from various family members, 43 text messages, and about 200 social media notifications. The videos had gone viral overnight. Sister reveals she owns wedding venue in Ultimate Wedding Crash had already been viewed 3 million times. The hashtags wedding revenge and plot twist were trending. My calm speech was being replayed and analyzed by complete strangers who were either applauding my dramatic timing or condemning me for ruining Emma's special day. The reactions were split pretty evenly between Queen, she served them reality on a silver platter, and psychotic sister destroys wedding with cruel mind games. I deleted the social media apps and made coffee, enjoying the peace of my actual life in my actual home. The first call came at 8 a.m., Dad's name on the screen. Jessica, we need to talk. Good morning to you too. This is not a joke. What you did last night was unacceptable. Emma is devastated. Emma got the exact wedding she wanted at one of the most exclusive venues in New England. I'm not sure what she has to be devastated about. You humiliated her in front of 200 people. I revealed the truth in front of 200 people. There's a difference. Silence on the other end as Dad processed this distinction. The Hendersons are furious about the scene. Brad's mother called this morning talking about reputation and family stability. This could affect their marriage. If their marriage can't survive the revelation that Brad's new sister-in-law is financially successful, then they have bigger problems than my speech. That's not the point, Jessica. The point is you deceived us for months. You watched us struggle with money, watched us stress about payments, and you said nothing. I walked out onto my deck, looking at the gardens I'd designed and planted myself. Dad, at any point in the last 6 months, did you ask about my life? My work? My financial situation? Did you express any interest in who I actually am rather than who you assumed I was? Another silence. Did anyone in our family ever wonder why a supposedly struggling architect could afford to contribute $75,000 to a wedding? Did it occur to any of you that maybe your assumptions about my success were wrong? We thought you were taking out loans, making sacrifices. You thought what was convenient for you to think. It was easier to assume I was struggling than to admit you'd been ignoring my actual accomplishments for years. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Dad alternating between anger, confusion, and grudging admission that maybe they'd misjudged my situation. But he never quite got to an apology, and he definitely never acknowledged that their treatment of me had been problematic. The call from Mom came an hour later and followed a similar pattern. Shock, anger, accusations of deception, and a complete inability to see how their own behavior had contributed to the situation. Emma's call came that afternoon, after she'd presumably recovered from her wedding night meltdown. Jess, we need to fix this. Fix what exactly? The family. The relationships. Everything's broken now because of what you did. Everything's honest now because of what I did. There's a difference. People are calling me spoiled and entitled on social media. They're saying I used you for money. Didn't you? The question hung in the air between us. Emma had no answer because we both knew the truth. I didn't know, she said finally. I didn't know you were successful. You never asked. In 3 years of me building a business, buying property, creating something meaningful, you never once asked about my work, or my life, or my goals. You only paid attention to me when you needed something. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you showed interest in my career, or my happiness, or my relationships? She couldn't answer that either. Emma, I gave you the wedding of your dreams. I made every single one of your wishes come true. I just did it as a successful businesswoman, rather than a struggling sister making sacrifices. Why does that make you angry instead of proud? Because you made me look stupid, she exploded. Everyone knows I was taking money from my rich sister while acting like I was doing her a favor by letting her contribute. There it was. The truth. Emma wasn't hurt by my deception. She was embarrassed by the revelation of her own behavior. You made yourself look that way, Em. I just provided the venue. The media attention continued for a week. Wedding blogs picked up the story. Financial websites wrote about hidden wealth and family dynamics. And social media kept the debate alive with increasingly creative memes and reaction videos. I ignored most of it. But I did save one particularly insightful comment thread where people shared their own stories of being underestimated by family members. The solidarity from strangers who understood the dynamics was more meaningful than I'd expected. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received an unexpected visitor at my real home. Emma stood on my front porch looking smaller and less polished than I'd ever seen her. "Nice house," she said quietly. "Thank you." "Come in." She followed me through the restored colonial, taking in the antique furniture, original artwork, and obvious signs of both taste and financial resources. "How long have you lived here?" 2 years. I bought it after I finished renovating Rosewood Estate. We sat in my living room with its fireplace and built-in bookshelves. afternoon light streaming through windows that looked out on professionally landscaped gardens. "I owe you an apology," Emma said without preamble. I waited. "Not for the wedding." "I mean, maybe for parts of the wedding, but not for accepting your help." "I owe you an apology for never seeing you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I spent my whole life thinking I was the successful sister, the one with the charm and the looks and the social skills that mattered. I thought you were just Jessica. Smart but boring. Hardworking but not successful. Reliable but not remarkable." She looked around my living room again. "But you built all this. You created a business, bought properties, made yourself wealthy, and I never even noticed. I was so busy assuming I was better than you that I completely missed who you actually are." It was the most honest thing Emma had ever said to me. "I'm not proud of how I treated you," she continued, "not just with the wedding money, but with everything. I took your contributions for granted because I thought you didn't have anything better to do with your money or your time. What changed your mind? Brad did, actually. After we got back from our honeymoon, he made me sit down and really think about what happened. He pointed out that you didn't have to reveal anything. You could have just paid for the wedding and let us keep thinking we were taking advantage of poor Jessica forever." She paused. "He said the fact that you chose to reveal the truth meant you wanted something to change. And the only thing that could change was how we treat you. Smart man, Brad. So I'm here to ask what you want from me. From us. How do we fix this?" I considered the question. What did I want from Emma? From my parents? From a family that had spent decades underestimating me? "I want you to see me," I said finally. "Not as your struggling sister who exists to support your dreams, but as a person with my own dreams and my own success and my own life that matters." "Okay. I want you to ask about my work, my goals, my relationships. I want you to show the same interest in my life that I've shown in yours." "Okay. And I want you to understand that success comes in different forms. You've always measured worth by social status and appearance, but building something, creating value, earning respect through work, that matters too." Emma nodded, tears starting to form. "I'm proud of you, Jess. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. What you've built is incredible, and I'm proud to be your sister." It was a start. 6 months later, my family dynamics had evolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. Emma and Brad's marriage was actually stronger. The revelation that she'd married into a family where her sister-in-law was more successful than anyone had realized seemed to give Emma a new perspective on her own capabilities. She'd started taking business classes and talking about launching her own event planning company. My parents had gone through their own reckoning. Dad's assumptions about business success had been challenged by the realization that his struggling daughter was actually more financially savvy than he was. Mom had started asking about my work and showing genuine interest in my architectural projects. The family dinners were different now. Instead of Emma holding court while I stayed quiet in the background, conversations included questions about my latest designs, my business expansion plans, my personal life. I'd even started dating someone new, David, a contractor who'd worked on several Rosewood estate weddings and been impressed by both the venue and the mysterious owner. When I'd finally revealed that I was both the architect and the proprietor, he'd asked me to dinner to discuss professional collaboration. 3 months later, we were collaborating on a lot more than business. Emma and I had lunch once a month now, real conversations where she asked about my projects, and I heard about her business plans. She was still Emma, dramatic, social, appearance-conscious, but she'd developed something that had been missing before: awareness of other people's worth. The wedding video still circulated occasionally on social media, usually accompanied by debates about family dynamics and whether my revelation had been brilliant justice or cruel humiliation. I'd stopped reading the comments, but Rachel sent me the occasional gem. My personal favorite was, "Imagine being so successful that you can afford to give your sister a $200,000 wedding just to teach her a lesson about assumptions. That's the kind of problem I want to have." The business had continued to thrive. Rosewood Estate was booked solid for the next 2 years, with a waiting list that grew daily. The viral wedding video had actually increased demand. Apparently, people wanted to get married at the venue where the most dramatic family revelation in wedding history had taken place. I'd also expanded into destination wedding planning, working with couples who wanted exclusive, architectural venues for their celebrations. The success had allowed me to buy that vineyard in Napa, which was being developed into a West Coast sister location. But the real satisfaction wasn't financial. It was personal. For the first time in my life, my family saw me as I actually was. Not struggling Jessica or reliable Jessica or boring Jessica, but successful, accomplished, independent Jessica who had built something meaningful with her own hands and her own vision. The girl who'd been overlooked for decades had finally stepped into the light, not by demanding attention, but by quietly building something so impressive that it couldn't be ignored. And Emma's perfect wedding? It had been perfect after all. Just not in the way anyone had expected. Sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in truth, and the most important lessons are taught at moments when people aren't expecting to learn anything at all. My name is Jessica Miller, and I own one of the most successful wedding venues in New England. I'm an accomplished architect, a savvy businesswoman, and someone who learned that being underestimated can actually be a strategic advantage. I'm also the sister who gave Emma the wedding of her dreams and a reality check she didn't know she needed. And if you're wondering whether I'd do it all again, the answer is absolutely yes. Because sometimes family needs to see exactly who you are, even if it takes a dramatic revelation at their perfect wedding to get their attention. The venue is still available for bookings, by the way, and I promise your family drama will never be quite as memorable as ours was. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever been underestimated by people who should know better, drop a comment below. And if you've ever owned the perfect venue for teaching life lessons, well, we should probably compare notes. Until next time, remember, the quiet ones are usually building something amazing while everyone else is making assumptions. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about unexpected success, family dynamics, and the satisfaction of proving people wrong at exactly the right moment. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just success, served with perfect timing and a side of truth.